Never. I don't ever give up. I'd have to be dead or completely incapacitated. For my part, I will never give up, and I mean never. I think people can choose to be not ordinary. You know, they can choose to not necessarily conform to the conventions that were taught to them by their parents. So, yes, I think it's possible for ordinary people to choose to be extraordinary. A source of strength, That's really not how I think about things. For me, it's simply, this is something that is important to get done, and we should just keep doing it or die trying. I don't need a source of strength. Quitting is not in my nature, and I don't care about optimism or pessimism. FCK that, we're gonna get it done. You guys are the magicians of the 21st century. Don't let anything hold you back. Imagination is the limit. Go out there and create some magic. Mars would just be the greatest adventure ever. And very exciting. And I think we need things in life that are exciting and inspiring. It can't just be about solving some awful problem. There have to be reasons to get up in the morning. Take risks now. Do something bold. You won't regret it. When something is important enough, you do it even if the odds aren't in your favor. When I was a little kid, I was really scared of the dark. But then I came to understand, okay, dark just means the absence of photons in the visible wavelength, 400 to 700 nanometers. Then I thought, well, it's really silly to be afraid of a lack of photons. Then I wasn't afraid of the dark anymore after that. I feel fear quite strongly. It's not as though I just have the absence of fear. I feel it quite strongly. But there are times when something is important enough, you believe in it enough, that you do it in spite of the fear. People shouldn't think, I feel fear about this, and therefore I shouldn't do it. It's normal to feel fear. There'd have to be something mentally wrong with you if you didn't feel fear. If you just accept the probabilities, then that diminishes fear. I think it's very difficult to start companies and quite painful. There's a friend of mine who's got a good phrase for doing a startup. It's like eating glass and staring into the abyss. If you're sort of wired to do it, then you should do it, but not otherwise. If you need inspiring words, don't do it. Well, I do think there's a good framework for thinking. It is physics. You know, the sort of first principles reasoning. What I mean by that is boil things down to their fundamental truths and reason up from there, as opposed to reasoning by analogy. Through most of our life, we get through life by reasoning by analogy, which essentially means copying what other people do with slight variations. And you have to do that. Otherwise, mentally, you wouldn't be able to get through the day. But when you want to do something new, you have to apply the physics approach. If somebody is doing something that is useful to the rest of society, I think that's a good thing. It doesn't have to change the world. If you make something that has high value to people, and frankly even if it's a little game or, you know, some improvement in photo sharing, if it has a small amount of good for a large number of people, I think that's fine. Having something that makes a big difference but affects a small to moderate number of people is great, as is something that makes an even smaller difference but affects a vast number of people. Stuff doesn't need to change the world to be good. Like $80 per kilowatt hour. So, clearly, you just need to think of clever ways to take those materials and combine them into the shape of a battery cell, and you can have batteries that are much, much cheaper than anyone realizes. It's very important to actively seek out and listen very carefully to negative feedback. This is something that people tend to avoid because it's painful, but I think this is a very common mistake. To not actively seek out and listen to negative feedback. When friends get a product, I say, look, don't tell me what you like. Tell me what you don't like. Because otherwise your friend is not going to tell you what he doesn't like. You really need to sort of coax negative feedback. If somebody's your friend or at least not your enemy, and they're giving you negative feedback, then they may be wrong, but it's coming from a good place. I think it's very important to have a feedback loop, where you're constantly thinking about what you've done and how you could be doing it better. I think that's the single best piece of advice. Constantly think about how you could be doing things better and questioning yourself. I read a quote from Arthur C. Clarke which said that, a sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And that's really true. If you go back, say, 300 years, the things we take for granted today, you'd be burned at the stake for. Being able to fly. That's crazy. Being able to see over long distances, being able to communicate, having, effectively, with the internet, a group mind of sorts, and having access to all the world's information instantly from almost anywhere on the earth. This is stuff that would be considered magic in times past. In fact, I think it actually goes beyond that, because there are many things that we take for granted today that weren't even imagined in times past. That weren't even in the realm of magic. So it actually goes beyond that. So I thought, well, if I can do some of those things, if I can advance technology, then that's like magic, and that would be really cool. A good sign as to whether there's free speech is someone you don't like allowed to say something you don't like? If that is the case, then we have free speech. And it's damn annoying when someone you don't like says something you don't like. But that is a sign of a healthy, functioning, free speech situation. One of the really tough things is figuring out what questions to ask. Once you figure out the question, then the answer is relatively easy. I came to the conclusion that really we should aspire to increase the scope and scale of human consciousness in order to better understand what questions to ask. The only thing that makes sense to do is strive for greater collective enlightenment. Always take the position that you're to some degree wrong, and your goal is to be less wrong over time. One of the biggest mistakes people generally make, and I'm guilty of it too, is wishful thinking. You want something to be true, even if it isn't true. And so you ignore the real truth because of what you want to be true. This is a very difficult trap to avoid. So, just take that approach, that you're always to some degree wrong, and your goal is to be less wrong. After his acquisition of Twitter to prioritize free speech on the platform again, next time buying Coca-Cola to put the cocaine back in. I would like to die on mass, just not on impact. On wrecking his McLaren F1 with Peter Thiel in the passenger seat, we're driving up Sand Hill Road, and Peter says, "So, what can this do?" And then, probably number one on the list of famous last words, I said, "Watch this." While entering Twitter HQ after acquiring the company, holding a sink, let that sink in. After almost dying from a misdiagnosed type of malaria, which he acquired on his first vacation, a trip to Africa, in years. That's my lesson for taking a vacation: vacations will kill you. If there's ever a scandal about me, please call it elongate. I put the art in fart. For the chemistry nerds, technically, alcohol is a solution. When asked why so many of the SpaceX rocket launches happen at night, it's much easier to do the CGI that way. On the need to go to Mars and beyond, we can't be one of those lame one planet civilizations.